comments. Neil?
Very good. Good morning. Thank you, Vice President Schweitzer, for chairing the meeting today. As you know, your colleague, President Warner, is on vacation, so taking a little spring break. I wanted to first address a story that grabbed some headlines related to pay raises. And, you know, that has to do with giving our non-union employees the first raise they had in 3.5 years. But it did come at a time that we were facing service increases and fare increases. I know that you were generally aware of that decision. What we didn't do, though, is communicate at the time we did it to the public that we were actually doing that. I would tell you that we actually do have documentation that we did when, you might remember during the budget process, we actually did a lot of deep dives into the, for example, contingency levels, and that topic was detailed in all of those conversations or documents that we exchanged, for example, to the constituents, for example, OPAL. But we didn't do a very good job, very transparent job of saying when we actually pulled the switch to activate those raises and those that amount, making that very transparent and public, and my apologies for that. As I told somebody yesterday at the editorial board, that it was really our, we followed business as usual practice in a year that wasn't business as usual, and for that we needed to do better, and we will do better, and we would be very transparent, and all of these actions really forward. I did want to just note the topic, which is that our non-union workforce had undergone 3.5 years of wage freezes. We had a series of inequities that were built up with that we needed to deal with. Our non-union workforce also had transitioned to a less generous health care plan, and were actually paying part of the premiums of that health care plan. So they were leading TriMet toward the benefit and compensation programs that we want to see more of in the future. So we thought these merit increases were important at that point in time, particularly since we'd seen a lot of people move on from the management ranks, and people frankly were doing more with less and having to work harder. That's, I think, something that has been true in all of our, portions of our economy of late. It certainly is true here as well. So we risked losing talented staff, and that was of concern. The pay increase averaged 3% over all the workforce, and that was the same raise, as you might recall, that the union was receiving at the time, and had received actually during that whole 3.5 years of the management or the non-union staff were under a freeze. So we kind of pause any questions that any of you might have or comments you might want to share with me. But again, my commitment to you that we will be much more transparent about that in the future. And again, no decisions have really been made as we move forward on that topic.
Mine's more of a comment. This is something that we did discuss in our finance committee meetings over the years as we do all of the issues. And from my standpoint, I've been here quite a long time and watched some really good people come and go as well. So I think it is important to keep people, and after 3.5 years, having gone through similar situations in my own office, I think it's well deserved. I think of people that were here, Beth and Steve, that was in your role prior. I'd say you were looking at it. So we need to keep good people, and so I guess I'm saying that I support the decisions you've made. Could we have been more transparent? Sure, and that's a lesson learned we need to follow through in the future.
Thank you. And I'd just like to add, because I remember having discussions with other board members and with you, Neil, about the need to unfreeze the management staff, and I supported that at the time. I still do. I also remember I was on the budget task force last year, and we had discussions at the budget task force about it last year, and I was advocating that it was something we need to do. Salary freezes, are necessary at times for short term. It's not a long-term solution, and as a former manager, I know that you really do rely on your staff to do their best. And lots of times you do see the management staff step up, lead the organization, as you say, in terms of scaling back some of the benefits and that type of thing. But it can't go on too long, otherwise you do lose good people. And when you lose good people, the organization suffers, the service suffers, the community suffers.
Well, I want to commend the non-union staff for sticking in there for 3.5 years without a raise. It's not been easy. I know, myself, with persons in other organizations are freezing. And I agree and support what you have done, and hopefully that the non-union staff will appreciate that the board is in support of that, and we wish we could do more. And along the way, as things change, we certainly will want to keep you in mind that you are deserving of increases for living and for working as well as others. It's a great thank you, and thank you to you as well. I know many times perhaps walking through the aisles, you may have had to have some funny stares about, okay, like, when is it going to happen? But thank you for what you've been able to do with the staff as it's gone through these 3.5 years.
I would share, I agree. We have a very motivated, very high-quality staff, and it's key to us. Well, let me move on, unless there's other comments or questions on that topic. I did want to update you again on the Clackamas County lawsuit that was filed last week. Dan Blanco will give you an update in a little later on the whole Portland-Milwaukee project, which is really going very well. But we did authorize legal action last Thursday. Cases were filed related to Clackamas County's not following through on some of the obligations and its funding agreements with us. And so we made that action as a declaratory judgment. Certainly Janice here can fill you in on any of the legal issues associated with that. But again, we were following through on both our own independent opinion as well as the opinion of the county council that the measure that was approved by Clackamas County voters last year did not apply to the funding agreement associated with the Portland-Milwaukee project. And I was unwilling to let us go all the way to the cliff before we actually made that point. And so I thought the timing of actually the case was important for us to sort of make sure that we have some time to resolve any issues before it becomes absolutely critical and things like damages begin to come into play. And so again, at this point in time, we're just asking for performance on the agreement and hoping to get clarity on that. We've offered and will continue to offer to Clackamas County the opportunity to mediate this and to have third-party assistance in that regard. Very anxious to do that, and we hope they take us up on that offer. It would be the most efficient way, I think, to resolve this issue for a long period of time. We'll certainly keep you posted. There's really no new legal development since the filing, but we'll certainly keep you posted on that. And wonder if there's any questions on that topic.
I actually do have a question. Is there a time frame for mediation or a target date to respond?
There isn't now. In terms of just the expected timing of the legal action, Jana, maybe you could address that. I don't think there's a timeline associated with mediation per se. We could really do that any time along the way. So our door will always be open to that. I also wanted to update you on the track safety issues. You might recall last week the ATU issued a press release and a series of photos showing potential problems that were identified as safety issues. This got the attention, thankfully, of the ODOT Safety Oversight Office, and they actually came out and spent on the order of 50 hours inspecting the system. We take any allegation of safety very seriously. So we were really pleased to find that ODOT came back and said there were no unsafe issues here, and that indeed TriMet was acting conservatively and in a very safe manner in terms of our operation. I wanted you just to know that it was a very thorough inspection. They looked at our track records. They also went out physically and looked and measured 21 track switches, 6 track crossings. They walked approximately 5 miles of rail and rode more than 28 miles on the system. And more rewarding to me was a call I got the morning that the report was released from ODOT Director Matt Garrett, and he just wanted to make sure that I knew that his staff was actually blown away by the complete access and transparency and openness of the TriMet staff to his inspectors. And so he was very pleased at that. And that was the only conversation I had with him about that. He just wanted to comment to me specifically, not so much about the safety issues, but about the transparency and proper actions of our staff along the way. So I really want to thank Harry, supported, who led that effort, as well as Shelley and Rick Pindig from our management team and operations, who I think kudos to them for that level of openness.
So during that, I'm assuming that this quote-unquote audit or review was prompted by the allegations from
Yes.
the ATU.
Yes.
Did ODOT take a look at any of the specific areas that the ATU highlighted?
They came out and did a general review first,
Mhm.
and then they asked the ATU for specific documentation. The ATU sent them the photographs and any documentation they had, and then they came back out and inspected each of those specific locations. So it's very targeted in that regard, as well as general in terms of overall safety. I would just note, and one of the things, we'll get into this a little bit more when we talk about the budget, but one of the areas that we do need to do some work, some rehabilitation maintenance work, is in the paved track sections, really from Holiday Street through the original Max turnaround. And that's a series of tracks that probably are 30 years, approaching 30 years old, and some of the construction techniques aren't what we would use today when they were originally done. So we have some issues, but in terms of the maintenance and the operations response, safety was always paramount, and that's what ODOT found as well.
It's good to hear.
I did want to just report finally on winter quarter ridership. We provided 23 million rides during December, January, and February. But overall, weekday ridership overall for the system was down by about 3.4%. It's interesting that bus ridership was actually up by 1.3%. And this actually included a 5% increase in weekend trips, which was interesting to us. Where we lost ridership was on Max, and it's probably not entirely surprising because this is tracing the effects of moving away from the pre-rail zone and some of the travel adjustments that have gone on with that. I've actually asked staff for a real deep dive on that ridership change so that we can see from what stations and origins, destinations that's occurring, and begin to see if there's any way we can begin to track those riders back. And going from free to 250 is a pretty steep increase for some, but so we won't be successful in all those cases. But in many cases, I think we do want to identify who those markets are and begin to target them, perhaps for some encouragement about coming back to the system. I would also note that.
So that deep dive will include, I mean, I assume we have the capacity or capability of taking a look at it by station to see what types of revenues come from a ticket station. I mean, because you've got different type of passes that we can't track, but we can track, over that timeline, what is being purchased at each ticket location, and we can track it that way,
Yeah.
correct? We
And
have
even
that
more than that,
capability.
we actually have automatic counters on the doors of all
Oh,
of
yeah.
our vehicles. So each station, we can tell you how many people get on and how many people get off. Now, what that doesn't tell us directly is what their origin was and what their destination was, per
Correct.
se. But we can get a pretty good idea based on the general patterns that we know.
Mhm.
And then I think what we're going to do is we'll look at the data that we've got, which is more gross, as I just described, but still specific to each station, and then decide where we want to go and do a little bit more consumer research and sort of dive into that origin destination this issue a little bit more.
Because that'll speak to, I know we talked briefly last year during the budget process about the elasticity of demand, and as we change and adjust prices, what does that do as far as ridership? So it'll be interesting to kind of see that information, especially as we're moving into the next budget, to see what things look like.
Right. I was saying, as you'll see that in the budget presentation, the fare revenue seems to be very close to what was predicted. But the ridership is a little lower than I probably would like to see. But again, it's probably all related to free rails. But we'll have much more detail on that as we go on.
Excellent.
Finally, I wanted to just let you know that next Monday is International Bus Driver Appreciation Day. This is an interesting idea. It was actually launched by transit riders in Seattle in 2009. And we picked up on it last year and actually did a number of internal events recognizing our operators. And that created a certain level of buzz. And so we wanted to really build on that this year. And so we've actually put up a new website, and we are trying to get other transit properties to actually sort of join the party here, and sort of begin to make this a sort of national official event in terms of appreciating our bus operators. The new website is busdriverday.org, and we are asking our customers to log in. You can print out a little thank you note to your bus operator, hand it in on Monday. But mostly we're asking all of us to note what a hard job our bus operators occasionally have, and how much we appreciate the work that they do every day. And so we're going to do a lot to promote this event internally as well, including within our own garage and amongst our family here. So I think this is a great way to recognize our employees, our frontline employees, and I know I'm going to be spending some time with my bus operator, I see every morning and evening on line 43. So, Madam Vice President, that completes my remarks, unless there's other comments.
Thank you. All right, well, we're still on here, Neil, on proposed budget, so don't go anywhere too soon. Okay, so we want to talk about the fiscal year 14 proposed budget. Neil?
Well, thank you very much, and you're going to be very tired of listening to me when we're done, but I apologize.
That's okay.
You know, there were some very tough choices that we made as we put the budget together last year. And I think those choices did bring us a level of stability for our riders and our employees and communities. I think we need to continue that course. And in the end, we know that there are some long-term threats to our financial stability, and that is primarily the cost structure that's implied with our healthcare benefit for our union employees. But I'm optimistic about the progress we made, and I think this is a very good budget for the year ahead. The headline here for everybody, I think, is that there are no proposed fare increases and no proposed service reductions. So we have stability for our riders. I think there's also a number of positive things we're going to be able to do in this budget, and we'll go through this here. But as we really start with the budget, what we obviously know is that we have a number of uncertainties still remaining. We continue to follow the federal funding conversations very carefully and closely. The growth of the economy still is not assured, but is looking better. I think every day we feel it's looking better. We, again, offer this year, I think, stability for our riders, which is, I think, a very good thing. But again, long-term, what we need to call for is the union's help in reforming the cost structure associated with, so the benefit structure in particular, with the 18-year contract. So what I wanted to just note before we get into this budget is that we actually did accomplish a lot last year. We eliminated the fare zones. We went to a flat fare, which I think is long-term very beneficial for the district and our riders. The free rail zone we just talked about, and we reduced and realigned service. And given the kind of budget problem we have, I'm really proud of how much service we were able to actually keep on the street. We started a $1.3 million low-income mitigation program we now call the Access Transit Program. The latest on that is that we actually have a series of grant requests, if you will, RFPs out to social service groups right now, and we're hopefully going to be granting some funds for low-income for mitigation to nonprofit groups around the region. We increased fare enforcement. We introduced 55 new buses, 4 of those were hybrids. Portland Milwaukee project you'll hear about, 35% on time, on budget. Thank you. And we completed our first binding interest arbitration. Complete is a little bit of a misnomer though, on that we still have to hear from the ERB on the union's appeal of that binding interest arbitration. And again, this year I called on the General Manager's Budget Task Force with a couple of new members to advise me on putting this budget together. And it was, again, just very rewarding experience to go through the deep dive with people of great, different experiences and background, but great deal of knowledge about organizations, that in some cases benefits, in some cases about our service and our needs, the need for our service in our community. I want to just note the key quote, and that you have the full report from the Budget Task Force in front of you. But it's clear to the BTF that no real progress for restoring our growing service can be achieved without changes to the labor contract as it relates to healthcare, benefits, and work rules. They also noted that our financial assumptions are sound related to building that budget. And what we always know about a forecast is that it's wrong. We just don't know the specifics of how it's going to be wrong. But the question is, are we using the best judgment that we can, putting together parameters like payroll tax growth, diesel fuel costs, healthcare cost inflation, all those other factors that actually go into building those forecasts. And they did look at those factors with a great deal of focus. They also noted that there's nothing binding about binding interest arbitration under the current set of circumstances we operate under. And they like the idea of going back to basics. And my theme for this budget was to really to fix what we have and pay what we owe. To a large extent, I think that's one of the key things we're going to be able to do with this budget. They also endorsed strongly the idea of a strategic plan that I know the Finance Committee has been working on to help us guide our decisions to be more transparent to the public about where we're going and how our choices in getting there. So again, their help has been very invaluable to me. And we actually, I think, have Lou Ann Pelton from here that I'll ask to come up and offer some comments to you as we get through this. So again, no fixed route fare increases, no service cuts. Overall operating budget expenditures $485 million. About 280 of that is payroll tax receipts. Passenger revenue projected to be about $119 million, and federal formula funds projected to be generally flat at about $50 million. There are a few things I guess I would want to say about this right at this point. One is that I'm recommending that we accelerate our bus replacement program. You might remember our long-term forecast had 40 buses a year. At that rate, it's going to take us, I think, too long to get to the point where the fleet is healthy. I say healthy as an average age of 8, and all low floor and all air conditioned. I'm recommending that we increase that number to 60 for the next 2 budget years. That will allow us to get into budget year 16 with achieving those goals of the average life of the bus fleet at 8 and all low floor, all air conditioned. So I think that's really important, and a really important message to our bus riders, as well as, frankly, good cost strategy in terms of the maintenance costs associated with our vehicles. I'm also proposing to increase the investment in maintaining our system. I talked a little bit about some of the track issues that we still have, that have been coming up as the system ages. Same with light rail vehicles. We have some older light rail vehicles that are going to need to get into a rehabilitation program. And I am proposing a slight increase in service related to overcrowded buses, schedule reliability, and serving, in one case, a new and important employment area in the region. Again, just a little bit more about the uncertainties. We have the ATU's appeal of the arbitrator's decision. All of the briefs on that have been filed. It's all in the hands of the ERB, and we're awaiting a decision on that. If we were to lose, I think that would require us to come back and look for service cuts in fiscal 15, not this year that we're finding out, but fiscal, so that would be in September of 2014. And as you know, our current contract negotiations remain at a standstill. Again, final briefs were filed with Judge related to that issue about should the negotiations be public meetings or not. So we're hoping for a decision on that before very long as well. One of the key things we're watching is the federal budget and the federal operating funds. Our forecast last year did indicate that we were going to have a $4 million cut. What actually happened was pretty flat, with the exception of one category that I'll go into here in just a moment. Our payroll tax receipts, this is sort of comparing year to year, we forecast $3 million less in fiscal year 13. We actually saw quite a bit more revenue than that. So our fiscal year assumption is that we're up about $28 million over that two-year-old forecast that we had. So that's a very healthy increase that we're very pleased to see. Ridership is down about 3.4%, as you saw, but fare revenue is pretty much on target, and so we've readjusted based on current ridership the fare revenue forecast, but does show an increase in fiscal year 14 just in terms of ridership growth over time. I did want to just sort of note that we've had a lot of questions about this, is how much can you put into new service with this? And I think the budget task force wrestled a lot with this. And I know we'll have some comments about this, but my view going into this budget is unless we can sustain the service, we don't want to begin to put it out just for 1 year. And with all the uncertainties in union contract negotiations, we're not in a position where we can guarantee the sustaining of that service over a period of time. The other thing is that I would generally say that we still have a lot of embedded catch-up to do. I talked about the bus fleet. Going a little bit more, the need to begin the rehab of the light rail vehicles and some of the light rail tracks. Fortunately, we have some new federal money on that I'll go into. And frankly, until our pensions are better funded, right now the union pension fund is only funded at 52%. So if we were a private fund, we'd be a red line. So we need to begin to put more money into that. And we have that incredible other employment benefit for healthcare liability as well. So we have a lot of things on our catch-up to-do list in addition to service that we have to balance. So our hope this year is to catch up on some of that and set a course where then we have a strong foundation for service growth if we can be successful in reforming the ATU contract moving forward. So the other thing just about fare revenue, while we have retrieved that, you might remember that our original budget last year did not include the extra money for the fare mitigation program. It didn't include the extra money for the Portland, Portland Public School Youth Pass program. So when we reconcile all of that, we're about $3.3 million below where we thought we were going to be in the last forecast related to overall fare revenue. I did want to note that we are, again, going to a whole series of proposing a series of service fixes. And we can go into specific lines, but to a large extent, they were really focusing on where we have overcrowded buses, where we have buses that can't meet scheduled times, need more time in the schedule, time being money. We want to continue the transit access program, the low-income fare mitigation program, and so that was included in the budget. We are moving to the credit ticket transfers this year, so we also think that will be helping on the revenue front, and moving toward mobile ticketing and electronic fare programs. So we're continuing those development efforts in this budget. Related to safety, security improvements, I wanted to note that we did include some additional funding for security personnel. This will primarily be the contracted security personnel. What we found is that we really need those additional bodies particularly for events, but will also provide us the opportunity to have additional presence on the trains, which I think is always a comfort to our customers. We do need to hire additional bus operators, as I think we've noted to you in the past, related to the hours of service agreement that we have with the ATU. And so there is a cost increase associated with just maintaining the current level of service under the new hours of service standard. We think that's a good investment in safety, but nonetheless, it's an investment we have to recognize in the budget. Related to the MAX system, I wanted to just note that there are a number of activities we need to take, and I think the really good news here is that we did receive an increase of, I think it was on the order of $9 million, I don't have the number here, in what a new program that was created in the MAP 21 legislation called State of Good Repair. And it was a recognition on the part of Congress that they wanted to shift some of the federal resources toward the good state of good repair of transit systems around the country. And obviously, there are many poster children for that. We're not one of them, but if you begin to look at the Chicago system or the New York system or the Boston system, you understand that there's a great backlog of repair and rehabilitation work. I would say those funds came to us just in time because our system, the oldest leg of it, is approaching 30 years old. We are in the midst of midlife overhauls really for the first of those light rail vehicles, but our next series of light rail vehicles are clearly beginning to approach that midlife as well. So we have a number of improvements associated with using that money, which is dedicated toward state of good repair activities. For rail, overhauling on Type 2 light rail vehicles, that's actually about $3.5 million. Some funding for for station improvements, and for example, the Sunset Transit Center, we have a problem with pavers we need to fix. So there's a series of activities like that, continuing some safety and security improvements on the older stations to upgrade the lighting and the visibility through the stations compared to the old design standards. One of the things that irritates me and many riders is the slow speed across the steel bridge. That's because some joints at the lift stand need to be replaced, and so we will include that activity in this year, as well as replacing some of the key switches. You sort of see a before and after on this slide. And also note on the bus side, moving to 60 buses as a replacement target for this next year. I might note that recall we were able to cobble together enough money this year. Our bus order that begins to arrive in May is at 70 buses. So 55, 70, 60, and 60. So you can begin to see the large number of, and what a great impact that's going to have to our customers and to our fleet moving along. So I wanted to also just note that we still face the long-term funding issues here at TriMet. And again, this is the line that we shared with you last week, the graphs that we showed, called the alligator jaws. And again, it shows that in fiscal year 17, and then remember that's September 2016, that the service would change. Some adjustment would be needed without changes in our cost structure overall. Keynote that even though we're pretty stable, we're really dealing with service fixes, a small number this year that totals to I think $1.6 or $1.7 million of service improvements. But other than the Portland-Milwaukee project, which was, might recall, was funded with the increment of payroll tax that was approved by the board in 2004, there's no additional service new lines that are really part of this. So we'll use that allowance, if you will, 1.6137, to really make some good improvements. I noted most of that is going to overcrowding, and it's interesting to know some of the overcrowding is occurring in the middle of the day, not even the peak hour, middle of the day, so we know we need to come back to some of those lines and really do a better job with them. We're also looking to improve service in a particular area in Washington County, which is to provide jobs access to the growing Intel campus at Ballmer Acres. And so we're going to change to line 47. Our meeting in March will be actually out in Washington County, and we'll give you an update on our Washington County service improvement plan for why that's such an important investment we believe to make in the near term. So as we move into the budget, I wanted to just let you know about the labor assumptions. Remember, we do assume that we will be successful right now in the current labor proposal that we've made. But I'd also note that there's many ways to achieve this financial result, and we really want to sit down with the union and work through the different ways that the financial result can be achieved. But it would be to move all of our employees to the same healthcare plan, which is the healthcare plan management employees have been on now for 2 to 3 years. We would reduce the cost and the benefit level for medical retiree retiree medical costs for new hires and hires not yet vested. There'd be a 2% wage increase and some work rule changes that help us be more efficient as a bus company and as an operator. So our long-term objective here is to really move more toward market-based compensation, really for everybody in the workforce. As you know, ATU represents nearly 2,100 of our workforce, of our members. That's 83% of our workforce. As that workforce goes, so goes our cost structure. We're largely people-driven business, so that becomes very key to our financial future. If that service, or if that proposal is in place again, we showed you this last month. It allows us to postpone and maintain current service levels really well into the 2020s. I think that allows us some time to make some further adjustments and efficiencies, and that's the hope, so that we can actually begin to be in a position where we can create a good foundation for growth for our region over a period of time. So again, the key to this is really healthcare costs and retiree healthcare. I know none of you are on the board to manage a healthcare agency. You're here to operate and manage and guide a transit district, and so that's where we want our business to go. So I wanted to just note also what might be disappointing to some about this budget. It certainly is to me, which is that we're not able to fund service increases that would match the employment growth in the region. That should be, I think, our long-term goal with the funding that we've got. We cannot really begin to fund the retiree medical trust that we want. We just simply don't have the capacity. We are including some additional pension funding in this forecast, but we need to step up to what I think is a sacred trust related to the pension program that we really have with our employees, to make sure that's well funded. And so that is some additional funding. This year we'll be putting $4 million additional into the ATU pension accounts. We're recommending that. That should grow to about $6 million a year between here and really until the plan is fully funded. There's always capital investments and growth of service that we want to do, and we always feel better when we have a little bit more in the bank account. But nonetheless, I still think this is a very responsible budget. I wanted to just also spend a moment on what's not causing our budget issues right now. First of all, in debt service, payroll tax debt. Right now, we're at, in this budget, 4.5% of our payroll tax for debt. That's well below the board's policy of 7.5%. So we've actually been able to edge that down over time. The Portland-Milwaukee project, as you know, TriMet is providing less than 5% of the overall capital cost of that project. It's largely a partnership-funded project. That, as well as the operating increment for that, are contained in the increment of the payroll tax increase the board approved in 2004. We have no money of our own in the Columbia River Crossing project. So we do have staff that is supporting the Columbia River Crossing. That's fully reimbursed by the project itself. The ultimate operating cost of that project will be really relatively low. We're just extending a mile of light rail into Vancouver. And that's well into the future. bus purchases actually, I believe, are in the long run beneficial to us related to just the trade-off between the capital cost and the maintenance cost of an older fleet. And I would come back to the administrative salaries, which is, remember that the non-union side of the agency is 7% of our operating budget. For the union, it's 41% of the operating budget. The union is 83% of our employees. So from over a long period of time, just a couple numbers, we've controlled the non-union headcount of the agency. The non-union headcount is 2006 levels. We're up a bit, and we've dropped some since 2008. Overall, our wages for the non-union employees between 2006 and today have gone up at a rate of overall 1.8%. For the union, those wages have gone up 2.6%. And the numbers are even more dramatic when you include total compensation, wages, and benefits. So I just wanted to also just note that this is really the launch of our public process related to the review of this budget. So you've got a copy of it in front of us. It will be on the web here shortly if it's not there already. We would ask the board, first of all, pepper us with questions about this, of course. But second of all, to approve a resolution at your March meeting that would transmit the budget for review to the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission, Mecklenburg County, on March 27th. And again, there are still many changes that can be made after that review. That review is scheduled from April 24th. And the resolution for the board to adopt the budget is proposed right now for the May 22nd meeting. And again, the new fiscal year begins July 1. Will be available for public comments and conversations over this whole period of time as well. Again, I think just to note that we have some uncertainty, but there were no service cuts, no fare increases this year, stability for our riders, and we're looking for a union's help to solve the problem in the long term. There's a question for board member.
Yep, correct.
Actually, two questions. The first one is on the public comment process. Last year, we had a very extensive process. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what kind of process you're looking at for this year. Would it be as extensive? Would it be modified? Just what are we looking at?
Generally modified. When you're talking about fare increases and service cuts, there's a whole lot of more reason to talk to the public, but very open. And one of the things we learned from last year was that we got some of our very best comments and input from the web. It's the new age, and that meetings are important, but not, frankly, as important as they used to be, given these other communication tools. But I'll let you say.
We'll continue. It doesn't have to be, we aren't doing it as extensive as last year because of the fare and service increase, or decreases, fare cuts and service fare cuts, service decreases.
No, the other way around, but that's
Other way
okay.
around.
They want to-
Thank you, Dr. Bethel. It's not as extensive as it was last year, although we are doing a lot of community outreach. It will be including this message in our community meetings that we'll be doing. We'll have a presence on the web. It won't be as extensive as last year with the charts that we can measure and stuff like that. It's more reactionary. We'll have the budget, this presentation, the ability to comment via phone, email, fax if you want. We'll be aggregating all of those comments in a report back to you.
And my second question, if I may, goes back to the Columbia River crossing. Because you explained that we'll have no capital money in it. The yellow line ends at the Expo Center. Now, my understanding was we'd be responsible in some way through the project to extend our line to the bridge. But I thought I heard you say that we were extending service into Vancouver. Wouldn't that fall to C-Tran to actually do that?
Yes, so absolutely right, but we would be responsible for.
We just need to get to the bridge.
Yeah, or the state line, or whatever the right boundary is. And then, you're right, there would be a partnership between Clark County funding sources and
So,
Thanks for that clarity.
so yeah, so the bulk of whatever extension might come out of that really will fall to the Washington side.
Questions?
Well, not so much questions yet, because ultimately, I mean, I think the overall perspective we're looking at is really positive. You know, I will say that I really like kind of the guiding principle, fix what we have, pay what we owe. That's something that I'm consistently, I actually just had a coffee with a constituent out in the East Metro this morning, and if I were to summarize this statement, it would be fix what we have, pay what we owe. I mean, that literally is kind of a concise way of putting what he said, you know, in a very short statement. And so overall, you know, not knowing, you know, the more detailed information, I would say that we are on the right track with, you know, with the focus of this budget. When we think about it, I think last year at a retreat, we looked at the perspective of what do our customers want, and one of the primary things was on-time service. And when we start to think about the repairs that we're talking about here, and ensuring that we're taking care of those things that actually allow us to deliver what our customers are looking for, I mean, that's critical in what I'm looking to as a board member. So, in the generality of looking at this information, this presentation, without more of the detail, I'm generally supportive and can't wait to kind of see what the numbers look like and be able to, yeah.
There's your night reading.
I'll break into it right away.
Yeah.
I can't wait. But no, I really do think that, again, this perspective of the outline that we're looking at, of course, I sit on the retirement trust and am keenly aware that we're only 52% funded. And it's our retirement plan is an appropriate plan. You know, I can say that. It's not something that we feel is out of line, and so this is something that we really do need to be funding, short-term and long-term, and there are other things that we have to take care of. So from the business community, I think they would be supportive of this, and there are business representatives that were on this task force that gave their input. I think they would be generally supportive of saying exactly that. I can't say it enough, fix what we have, pay what we owe. So again, can't wait to get into the numbers and start to see what that looks like.
Yes. I want to first talk about the meetings and to make sure that the meetings in the community become equitable. Last year, when we came back, we had to add a request to go to some areas. That's to make sure that there is at least one meeting in each of the districts or someplace, and close and accessible transportation, done at a time where the general masses can get to the meeting and also have access of getting back home, so they have an opportunity to participate. Secondly, and I have not had the opportunity to go through this, as most of us have not at the point, but I am concerned about what will happen around the school pass program and our donation to that, with the partnership between the city and the Portland Public Schools. I certainly do not want to see another repeat of what we had last year in terms of trying to work this out. And then if there is something, we'll look into that for the low fare mitigation program to continue in fiscal year 2014.
So obviously, just a note on that last point, it is that fare mitigation program continues, and we're very excited about it. Obviously, it took some time this year to get it ramped up, and so I think really next year will be the real full test of its effectiveness. So I think it's important to do that. On the student pass, we're continuing our conversations. I would say very constructive partnership with the city and the school district. But I also would say both of those agencies are facing the same kind of budget shortfalls or tightness that we are. So I think our hope is to use this next year as a place to really review the program and the appropriateness of it. But we'll have further conversations with you and those partners about it as the budget process continues.
I just have a little bit of pushback, but also just some comments. I think, one, it's good to look at accomplishments because we tend to forget those in the midst of everything else that comes about over the year. So that's good to have that down.